Oh look, here you are. I'm so overwhelmingly delighted that you've decided to join us as we talk about the age-old writing dictum, show, don't tell. If you've ever taken a creative writing class or spent much time around creative writers, you've probably heard the advice that you should show rather than tell in your writing. Usually, people say that it makes your writing more engaging, providing a better and more immersive experience for your readers. But there's more to show, don't tell than just good advice. In fact, I think there's a pretty good rhetorical reason for why this piece of advice has proven so valuable for so long. I would argue that showing rather than telling in a poem or short story does exactly the same thing that citing sources does in a research paper. That is, showing lets you create more persuasive work, and that is what I'd like to talk with you about today. When it comes to showing and telling, we're usually interested in the difference between writing that communicates through imagery and writing that doesn't. Writing that tells just communicates an idea, while writing that shows communicates sights, sounds, and much more. So, for example, here's a very telly sentence. Thompson was sad, but he refused to give up. And here's one that does more showing. Thompson blinked away tears even as he strained to hold the rope. As you can see, that first sentence does convey information, but it's nothing you could really visualize. It just tells you what happened. The second sentence, however, gives you a lot more to visualize. It's actually showing you what was happening instead of just telling you. But showing is not just good practice because it makes things more interesting. By showing, you give your readers a real chance to experience the things that you want them to experience. So consider, for example, a poem that's written to make its reader feel some kind of sadness. You could write a poem that just tells them to be sad, for example, something like this. A very sad poem. This poem is sad because I am sad. What happened was bad, and I want you to be sad as well. So feel sad as me, as sad can be. Now, how sad did you feel after hearing that poem? My guess is not very, but that might change with a poem that shows more than it tells. Roommate wanted. On the Friday after our last date, I crossed from the far corner of campus, sidewalk and sky seamlessly gray. And I watched my boots darken, listened to the hiss drip playing on the umbrella's membrane. The quad was unusually bare, me, some scattered squirrels, and reams of flyers taped to the concrete, warping in the wet. Roommate wanted, an indiscriminate appeal, someone, anyone, broadcast to an empty campus, and to me, stuck in half a lease and another half-mile of rain. So, where the first poem just tells you to feel sad by saying outright, feel sad, the second poem instead invites you to experience the kind of sadness that the speaker of the poem is also experiencing. Forget the rainy cliche for a second. Odds are you found the sadness in the second poem more persuasive. The second poem doesn't tell you to feel sad. Instead, it shows you a moment of sadness and invites you to live in it for a little bit. So writing that shows is generally perceived to be better, but why? Let's take a closer look at what showing actually does in writing so that we can understand why people are always saying that showing is better. When you make an argument, that argument is built out of two main components, the claim and the evidence. Now, we've covered claims and evidence at greater length in another video, but just so that we're all on the same page, a claim is the point that you're trying to make, while evidence is the stuff that confirms the validity of your claim. So if you're going to walk into a room and make the claim that Jenkins is the murderer, the first thing that somebody is likely going to say will be prove it. Your claim might be true, but people aren't going to accept it without evidence, so you're going to have to produce proof, fingerprints, security footage, stuff like that. Now, imagine that you're going to tell a story about a character who is sad. You might, for example, just say Thompson was sad, but subconsciously, your readers are going to ask for some kind of proof. You can't just tell them your character is sad, in other words, you're going to have to provide some evidence for that sadness, and that is where showing comes in. Showing, in other words, is the creative writer's equivalent to citing sources to back up an argument. When you're writing about a sad character, your real goal is to persuade your readers that that character is in fact sad, and that's just not going to happen if you just ask them to take your word for it. So instead you add details like tears, frowns, wilting flowers, all in order to show them that your character is in fact sad and to get them on board with the claim that you're trying to make. So really, when it comes down to it, the people who say show, don't tell are actually saying back up your claims with evidence. Now, the classic advice would have you believe that you have to pick between showing and telling, and that you should always pick showing. But the fact is that both have value, and knowing how to show and when to tell is something that can really set you apart as a writer. Just think about it rhetorically. A claim without evidence isn't credible, but evidence without a claim is just a jumble of information. So not only does evidence help your readers to believe a claim, but the claim helps your audience to know how to interpret the evidence. Even details that you think would obviously show your readers one thing might need a telling nudge to help them to interpret it in the appropriate way. I mean, it's not unusual to hear people ask, are those tears happy or sad? So imagine a pair of periodic sentences that show readers all the same information, but that also tell two very different stories. In each of these sentences, the reader gets the same set of evidence, the same details, but the telling part of the sentence helps the reader to know how to read those details. They could either be omens of a bad day or signs of a wonderful one. The main clause in the sentence tells, but it serves as a claim that helps the reader know how to interpret what they've been shown. Of course, you could also tell your reader how to interpret the details by the way that you show them. The sun grimaced through the low clouds, rain hissed on the shingles and slithered in rivulets to the ground. The trees shivered in the unwelcome cold of the late summer breeze. Clara sighed. In this case, the showing is inflected with evaluative language that helps the reader to know how to interpret what is being presented. So the way you show can serve as a kind of telling, and whether you tell outright or through evaluative diction like this, you're probably going to have to do something to ensure that your readers are understanding the point that you're trying to make. And that brings us to our main point. Just as claims and evidence work best in a paper when they're together, showing and telling both have their purpose in creative writing, and skilled writers will know how to handle both. So, as is so often the case, what passes for a rule for creative writers really only gets us partway to the truth. The fact is that show, don't tell is probably a rule that a creative writing teacher made up in order to get their students to do more showing. And sure, you'll probably want to do more showing than telling on the whole, but the reality is that experienced writers do both all the time. So remember, whether you're persuading your readers to support a city ordinance or to believe that your villain really is a dastardly wretch, effective writing hinges on your ability to present compelling claims and to support them with convincing evidence, no matter what form it comes in. Really, the best expression of our rule would probably be something like show and tell so that you and your readers always stay on the same page. And with that, I'll leave you to try it out. If you learned something useful in this video, give it a like and share it with your other writer friends. Also, let me know in the comments, what other writing rules have you heard people say but never really explain? I'd love to talk about them with you in the future. But until then, thanks for watching and happy writing.